We're officially live on the fourth episode of Sidelines Pass hitting the Hardcourt. Sam couldn't join us today, but joining us, of course, live back on the East Coast again is Fonz Yap. If you have any inspiration to go to the dark side, definitely see him as your Jedi Master. And also joining us today, of course, we got Jason Dunmore. Fellas, say what's up to all the fellow sideliners out there.
How's it going, guys?
And of course, I am your host, Joshua Thompson, bringing you this episode today. We're bringing you several subjects today. First and foremost, we're going to hit you with a post that we like to see as a contributor of the week. It's a really big contributor in our community, especially in NBA and NFL topics. Mike Cortez, he's bringing up the question of Rookie of the Year. It's about that halfway point. It's not quite there yet. I'll say we're more about 3/8 through the season if you really want to get technical with the math. And we're looking at some really good candidates for Rookie of the Year. And Fonz, let's go ahead and start out with you. On this post, as you were reading some of the candidates for Mike Cortez's Rookies of the Year, who did you pick out, or did you have someone different, and why?
I mean, I think most people really went with Kristaps Porzingis, 36 Latvia, Zingis Khan, the man of many nicknames. But honestly, like I still think Karl Anthony Towns should be the Rookie of the Year. Simply because if you look at most of the stats, I mean, I don't really watch a lot of Knicks and Wolves games. I mean, who would, really? Yeah, just basing it off the stats, Towns still has a little bit of an edge on Porzingis. He has to do a lot more. He doesn't have a Melo to, throw the ball to and basically, jab step / fade away his way into getting a lot of points. And yeah, I mean, like the Wolves are still very much a team that's developing. I mean, everybody knows that, in a couple of years they're going to be great, but right now there's like zero spacing. So Towns has to work with, he has to work with Garnett, with Prince, with Wiggins, and Rubio, all these guys who are more or less, crowding the paint. And he's still getting his points, and he's still being such a productive, efficient player. And yeah, the whole efficiency thing is really, really great for him because, Porzingis can more or less pick his spots because he has a lot more veterans to work with. But Towns, he's carrying the offense, and overall, I still think just because of how much of a burden he has on offense and on defense, I still think he's arguably the better candidate. But honestly, it's a toss-up between those two.
What do you think, Jason?
I guess to be completely honest, I went into this season thinking Jahlil Okafor is the guy to see. But the one thing I forgot to realize is that he has no point guard to get him the ball. Being a resident of Philadelphia and being that I just came back from Philly, for Christmas, I've been able to be around a bunch of friends who were able to see him up close. And honestly, if they could get a few more wins, personally, I like Jahlil Okafor. I mean, I know he can't get the wins like the other guys can because Kristaps Porzingis is putting up numbers. Don't get me wrong, he's putting numbers up. So is Karl Anthony Towns. I like Jahlil Okafor because and I'll say this, if Jahlil Okafor was in New York or in Minnesota, he'd be doing the same exact things that they're doing right now, that Kristaps Porzingis is doing in New York and that Karl Anthony Towns is doing in Minnesota. He'd be doing the same thing in LA. I think that's the one thing I look at is that he doesn't lack consistency. Unfortunately, what he does lack is a point guard to get him the ball on the block, because if he got the ball on the block, he'd be able to show you that he's worth it. Well, taking that out of it, I'm gonna go with Kristaps Porzingis because it's New York. He's the sexy pick. They may make the playoffs as a 7 or 8 seed if they could get hot, if Melo could get healthy, if they could possibly make a trade for Brandon Jennings. They may, it may up his value just a little bit more. So I'm going to go Kristaps Porzingis.
So wait, so you're saying that because of the team and because of the surroundings that Porzingis, along with what he's added to the team, he's going to get that's why he gets your vote.
He gets my vote because it's the one thing I like. The one thing I'll say I don't like about sports. The one thing I hate about sports is sports love. And think about it like this: all 4 major sports: football, basketball, baseball, hockey. Sports loves a New York feel about things. Whenever there's a good guy that comes to New York, we love to rah it up. Oh my gosh, the Jets got Rex Ryan. Carmelo's come to the Knicks to save them. I forgot the goalie for the Rangers. Like they love to have this feel for New York. And I'm me being a Philadelphian, I'm just like give me a break with it. So with Kristaps Porzingis just doing what he's doing, I wouldn't be surprised if people don't go as far as to say that he needs to play on Sunday for the All-Star game.
Wow. Okay.
It's
Now
New York.
I figured that he'll definitely be on the rookie sophomore challenge game for sure. But I wouldn't go as far as putting him on an all-star team. I mean, you're still talking about a player that was, and this goes to your point, is only having as high expectations and as high as exposure to the league as he is now because he is in New York.
Right.
Now,
exactly.
Now because he's on the Knicks, I would argue that if he were on Brooklyn, that this wouldn't be the case. And same goes, and here's why I have the same feeling towards Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns was in a dead heat going into his draft for being the top overall pick. So it didn't matter if you went 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't matter. The league was going to be following him anyway. Stats are stats, but I think that what Karl Anthony Towns is absorbing right now, he's doing the same work that he was back in his collegiate days, but now he's just absorbing what Kevin Love used to do for the Timberwolves. And I think about it like this, and we can always play what if scenario, but if Kevin Love we're still on the Timberwolves, we wouldn't be talking about Karl Anthony Towns right now. We would be talking about a veteran team that's putting together probably one of the highest offensive rebounding totals in the NBA, and how they're getting their second chance points and why they're probably sitting about sixth in the league right now. They're not sitting sixth in the league right now. They're not doing the best that they can. They're actually on the decline ever since Flip Saunders passed, rest in peace. And so what I'm really saying is that stats are going to be stats, but I'm kind of iffy about picking either of your candidates. In fact, let's talk real quick about some dark horses. One player that is still not getting love from anybody and is still a very surprising play for everyone. Let's talk about Justice Winslow real quick. So, Jason, actually, let's start out with you, Fonz. I know you've been a little bit quiet over there. What's your take on if you were to vote if Justice Winslow were to win this over Karl Anthony Towns? What would you say to that?
I mean, it's certainly possible, but I mean, I don't think unless the Heat go small, I don't think he'll have enough shots, enough stats, honestly, to get that many votes. Yeah, I saw him on Monday. I went to the Warriors Heat game, and since Whiteside was injured, the Heat had to use a small ball lineup, and Winslow, who pregame and right before the third quarter started, he was getting up shots. You could really see he's working hard. But honestly, just like the number of shots that he's not that involved in their offense. You have Wade and Bosch, Dragic, Luol Deng every now and then. They take most of the shots, and Winslow, he's great, but I don't think there's a lot of hype around him. Smart basketball fans know how great he is because he's kind of like a Kawhi Jr., all-around guy, great on defense, hardworking. But yeah, there's not a lot of we don't really see a lot of like, oh, look at what Winslow did, on Twitter. We don't really see these vines, these little gifs of what he's doing. He has the talent to do it. He can, dunk with the best of them. But yeah, I just don't think he'll have enough of those counting stats, points per game.
But is that a result of media hyping up everything about the Knicks? Since the Knicks were this huge experiment going into the draft. They chose a player out of Lafayette, which no one heard about until 2 days before the draft. Is playing alongside Carmelo Anthony, who everyone was thought on his last legs, maybe his last season with the team, was ready to go out, and all of a sudden he's playing in a position. Keep in mind that most have not really seen him play. has been getting some of these highlights, and so it's been more of a snowball building going downhill. So the reason why people are seeing all these highlights is because as part of that media snowball that's building is being fed to all of us as fans. I mean, again, I would say that you could do the same for Justice Winslow that's being done for Kristaps Porzingis right now, and then we will be having this conversation turned around. Porzingis would be the definite dark horse candidate, and it would make much more sense, being that we didn't hear much about him. He got drafted really high, was actually a smart pick for Phil Jackson and the Knicks. And it turns out that it's actually causing them to have some success with them being in the hunt for a playoff spot. I definitely think that we could flip that around all because of the media. What do you think, Jason?
That's the reason I said that Porzingis would win Rookie of the Year. It's a hype thing. Justice Winslow, I agree with Fonz. Justice Winslow is he's a Kawhi Jr. If he gets the minutes, if he took over Luol Deng's minutes, you might be looking at the Rookie of the Year. If he's only averaging 5.4 points a game on 39% shooting. He's not. He has to, redefine the mid-range game because he's a to the basket or nothing guy. But if you look at it, he can defend with the best of them. He's probably one of their better defenders, with an exception to Luol Deng. He's probably one of their better perimeter defenders. I respect Gerald Green as a perimeter defender, but come on.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that hype is there, though. That New York hype is there. It's no such thing as a South Beach hype. There, we have the New York media and the LA media. If you don't play on one of those coasts, you're in the middle with everybody else, the small markets. Justice Winslow, he's just as good as he could help a lot of the teams out in the league. Move Jeremy Lamb off of Charlotte and put Justice Winslow in there. That's your Rookie of the Year right there. Forget whoever else is competing for Rookie of the Year. Justice Winslow is your Rookie of the Year if he played for Charlotte, because he'd get a start and he'd get the opportunity to show he could lock defenders down on a nightly basis.
Now, Fonz, you got any last words on that before we start talking a little bit more about the hypeless East?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about minutes. It's all about, I think the Heat are really just taking it slow with him, which is a fantastic strategy. Let him develop the game at his own pace instead of, with the other guys letting them. We say you need to play the rookies. Like, that's a problem with LA, but I think there's another thing where you can just allow him to work with these veterans, with Bosch, with Wade, Deng, all these guys who have been in the league for 10 plus years, and just let him pick his spots, because they can't really afford to make him take 10 shots and then he's going to miss, 7 of them. They can't afford to make him take 5 threes and he'll miss all of them. So, yeah, I think it's just, he could have been our Rookie of the Year, but I don't think, he's lost too much already this far into the season. I don't think he's going to get anywhere near the top.
So far, looks like Porzingis is definitely high up there as a 1, maybe a possible 2 behind Karl Anthony Towns. But with Towns being on the West, Porzingis hitting a big market in New York. And New York's not even the second-ranked team in the East. Let's talk about the East for a second. When just last year, I personally griped about the records of East Coast teams leading up to last year making playoffs with sub-500 records, and know how the tables have turned between the West and the East. And now the East yielding 8 complete teams, all with records of over 500. And Toronto, the second-place team in the East right now behind the Cavs, who will get back to some other time as far as how bad that game was last night. But let's talk about number 2 in the East. Fonz, Toronto's in second right now. The Bulls are only about a game and a half, 2 games behind them. Who's really the number 2 in the East right now?
I would say the Bulls, if they had a more experienced coach. Jimmy Butler has taken the superstar leap this year. He is wonderful. He's, as somebody said, I forget who, he's like the second toughest shot creator in the league. Like, he takes extremely difficult shots because Bulls' offense is pretty crappy. But he makes so many of them. Like, it's really been, more or less a great story. A guy who I think was the last pick in this draft, who has really just each year gotten better. And now we see uh, just how good he really is. He's basically taken over the offense. Rose is more or less, he's there, but he's not the player that he once was, as we all know. Um, but yeah, I think overall the Bulls are great, but Hoiberg still learning the ropes. And there's still some things here and there that they need to work out. Like if they could get Cal Korver back, like he would, or like an Anthony Morrow, like a really good shooter, that would really help them. Uh, but yeah, I mean, both them and the Raptors are great, but I don't think anybody's gonna beat the Cavs because the Cavs are still the Cavs.
And Jason, what do you think?
That's a tough question because before the season started, I was so on the Washington Wizards bandwagon to be the number 2 seed. They're going to be great. John Wall is good. They're good. But the weird part about it is that I have to side with Fonz. The Bulls are really good, and I say the same because Hoiberg is new. The offense they're still filling each other out, but I don't know if they need a Korver or not, or Anthony Morrow. Please don't take Anthony Morrow from the Thunder. I think they need to get McDermott running again, and more importantly, to me, the X factor always will be and forever has been Joakim Noah. Get Joakim Noah going well. If you can get McDermott shooting the ball and you can get Joakim Noah doing anything Joakim Noah does, then you really have a legit chance at beating Cleveland.
Well, that's a lot of ifs. I mean, we're looking at the plausible health of the Bulls, so it's a projected number 2. But right now, do you think that the Bulls are playing better than Toronto?
Yeah, DeMar Carroll's not around. Unfortunately, I see another second-round finish for Toronto. So the Bulls, I look at the Bulls as being the Bulls have to be number 3, or better yet, they may have to push for that number 2 so they can avoid Cleveland in the second round. They have to push for it because if they don't, and they meet Cleveland in the second round, then Cleveland is just going to sweep through whomever they get to in the next round. In that Eastern Conference Finals matchup, Chicago has to. I think that with like I said, with those ifs, Joakim Noah has to play like Joakim Noah plays. And it's like you can still see he's a little bit hurt. He's still getting adjusted like Zach Randolph is to coming off the bench. And it's like you get Jimmy Butler playing well. You get Rose playing half well. Because let's not forget, Rose is still really good. And if anybody can make Kyrie Irving work, it'll be Derrick Rose in the East. I mean, aside from John Wall. John Wall knows one speed like Russell Westbrook, fast. Rose can break him down. He can post him up. He'll take him to the rim, and he gets foul trouble on him. I don't understand why Curry didn't expose Dellavedova like in the finals as if he should have, but Derrick Rose definitely will. So I'll say that Chicago has to be the number 2 team in the East, because if they're not, then they face a tough second round, and they may go home, and that team has to be broken up if they go home in the second round. You have to break them up.
All points noted. Toronto right now, again, two games over Chicago, and as we get closer to the halfway point, the definite hope, I'm sure, for everyone in Toronto is that they don't have a mental breakdown like they did last season and seasons prior. And speaking of possible matchups for the Cavs, let's talk about what happened last night between the Spurs and the Cavs. Spurs beat the Cavs 99-95, and and what was the most amazing thing about this game was that at one point the Spurs were down by 20-plus points. In fact, first quarter score 32-20 Cavs, 50-44 to end the half, and the Spurs ended up winning it by 4 at home to extend their home winning streak to 23-0. The big overarching question I have, but it's actually a two-part question, I'll start with you, Jason. In a best of 7 matchup between the Spurs and the Cavs, who do you got?
I go San Antonio. And I go San Antonio because the one thing as a kid, I used to hate watching Utah play because Utah moved the ball, set screens. John Stockton did the right thing. He basically would get Byron Russell a jump shot or a three. He would get Hornacek a three. He would get Mailman a layup. That's what the Spurs do. They move the rock.
I hated them too for that exact point. I don't know how many of you grew up in the years of Jordan and Pippen and the Rockets, Clyde Glide Drexler, but I hated 2 teams growing up. Utah was number 1, and San Antonio was a not so distant second. And if you ever wanted to learn the pick and pop, the pick and roll, whatever the pick and you can go ahead and get about 65 points off of this.
Utah.
You watch the Utah Jazz with Jeff Hornacek and Karl Malone. Oh man, that
would pick and pop you to death, and that's what's saying that. With respect to that, I played basketball in high school. I played basketball in college, and the one thing that I realized that Popovich says that my coach would say, nobody moves faster than the ball. And that's what they do. I watched the game last night, and they were down. They played pretty poorly. LaMarcus Aldridge wasn't getting shots or anything like that. He wasn't getting good shots. He wasn't taking LaMarcus Aldridge shots. But then the second half came around, and Tony Parker began to do what he wanted. That's why I look at Kyrie Irving and I say Kyrie Irving has trouble against other elite guards. Tony Parker did what he wanted. He got those shots. He got Kawhi Leonard shots. He got Tim Duncan in the sets. He got his team running, and it got to the point where the star power of LeBron and Kyrie were no match for the team of the Spurs. In a series, they'll lose.
That's interesting that you bring up that point because, and this is more of the second part of that question that I have to ask. And Fonz, you can jump in on this question. In fact, the result of this game, was it better, more methodical play by the Spurs, or was it just poor play and poor execution by the Cavs?
I mean, I think obviously there's a little bit of both in that, but I think, just watching the Spurs last night, watching them on TV, it's like you see, during the timeouts, you would see Pop just shouting at Tony Parker, just like telling him, move the ball. And, I think during the second quarter, they had a timeout, and Pop said, they're playing like our big brother. And, that seemed to like spark the Spurs a bit. And just once again another timeout. Manu Ginobili shouting at Tony Parker, shouting at Tim Duncan. And nobody knew what they were saying, but more or less, telling them like probably just like play better. So yeah, like I think the Spurs are the excellence of execution, to borrow a wrestling term, and it's really mind-boggling just how. Like there was no loss of quality when Tony Parker sat down and Patty Mills came in. They're completely different players. Patty Mills likes to shoot the three more, can't drive as well. But I think just like the sheer roboticness of everything they do just killed the Cavs because the Cavs are LeBron, Kyrie, and Love. Meanwhile, the Spurs are Kawhi, Aldridge, Duncan, Ginobili, Parker, Mills, Diaw, Boban, who's on the bench who didn't play. But, it's everybody from the guy from the starters all the way down to the 12. Everybody knows what they want to do. As we've said so many times about the Spurs, everybody knows to take the best shot. Tim Duncan passed up an open mid-range shot to pass it to Kawhi, who had an open three. Kawhi missed it, but still, that's what they're thinking. They're always thinking, let's get more points. Let's get more points every possession. And I think the Cavs are more just like, let's just get the points because we as a team can't really handle just the sheer like waves of attack that the Spurs have.
And so out of those two, we're definitely looking at some great improved Spurs play. I was unfortunate enough to miss this game, to be quite honest, and what the saddest part about me missing this game was that I was not surprised that not only did the Cavs blow this huge lead, but that the Spurs won this game in such fashion. And you have to understand why the lack of surprise that I had for this game. The Spurs have the highest margin of victory in the NBA this season. Highest margin of victory in comparison to leading teams like the Cavs, with dominant team led by LeBron James, and a high-octane scoring teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder and the league-leading Golden State Warriors. What does that mean? To me, that means that the San Antonio Spurs know how to step on the gas and leave a brick on the pedal and keep the car running and say, hey, you're either going to have to jump in the car, Dukes of Hazzard style, or get left behind. So if anyone else at home is wondering how did this happen, again, I would say go back to the days of the Utah Jazz and just think, or as was quoted from Remember the Titans when Denzel Washington said, it's like Novocaine. All you need is time for it to work. It's just so simple when it happens. Now, now that we reached the end of this segment, I wanted to give our guests a couple of minutes each to address something that we might have not been able to talk about in the today, for as far as NBA is concerned, or anything that's going on in the sports world. And Jason, we can start out with you. What do you have anything for us to take a look at going forward, or to think about for today?
I'm going to keep it really simple, and I'm going to tie it into the Eastern Conference. I'm going to keep it in basketball. I'm going to say that if you don't know, or if you were sleeping under a rock, or whatever you want to call it, Andre Drummond is really good. Andre Drummond should be the starter for the Eastern Conference in the All-Star game this year. He's averaging 15.6 boards a game, and he is averaging, I think, 17 points a game. So he's averaging 17 and 15. Andre Drummond should be the starter not because of that, but because in the transition of the big man, the stretch four, Andre Drummond has been there. Now I think that with the Pistons being the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference, you better hope that Cleveland remains number 1 and Chicago becomes number 2. Because if they don't, you could possibly see Detroit in the Eastern Conference Finals. Because Andre Drummond is that good, and so I've been a fan of Reggie Jackson. Andre Drummond is that good, and if I were Detroit, if you trade away Brandon Jennings, you better get something back to complement your team. Because if not, you keep Brandon Jennings, and now you have 2 point guards who are legit, and they can go out and take you, along with a big man, they can take you to the Eastern Conference Finals. So that was my take.
Yeah, so I think for me it's probably the Warriors. I mean, have to mention them. Yeah, but it's just like a small thing or kind of a big thing actually, where it's you have Brandon Rush starting instead of Harrison Barnes now, and it seems like Barnes has been healthy for I think 10-ish games, and it's been consistent ever since Barnes got injured. I think Walton is making Malton or Kerr, who knows who's making all of these decisions. They're making Barnes more or less the bench scorer for the Warriors. You have Barbosa, Livingston, Festus, and Barnes, and some other, maybe Spates or James Michael McAdoo, or Ian Clark, one of those guys in the bench. And I think if because Barnes can do a lot more for the bench than he can do with starters. With the starters he's playing with Clay, Draymond, Curry, Bogut, all of those guys who are great and who need to get their shots. And the bench really does need some scoring, because in the past, when Curry and Draymond would leave the game, the Warriors would suck, basically. So with Barnes there, I think it's a lot more balanced. He can get a shot, he can develop a lot more. and he can still play in the fourth quarter, with the death lineup. So it's just a little interesting thing that I've noticed. That's not super, hidden. But I think another thing they could do eventually is start Festus instead of Bogut, simply because Festus, he does a lot more for the offense. I think, he's more dangerous, he's more explosive on the pick and roll. Bogut's still a wonderful player, but I think having him on defense, to more or less cover up the weaknesses of Barbosa and Livingston, would really help the team as a whole. And I think, given that they won last year, and everybody was Iguodala coming off the bench, I think everybody would just be like, okay, if it leads to more victory, sure. If they lose 2 games where they're doing that, just go back to the way it was when, hopefully reach 70 games.
Going down firing like that pick you had for Christmas Day with the Cavs over the Warriors. Still never going to let that go. And Jason over there with saying the seventh round, the seventh seed, the Detroit Pistons are going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. It probably doesn't get more surprising than that, but Sideliners, if you feel the need to stay tuned going forward in the season, we'll definitely bring you some more confusing, astounding, and shocking statements to Sidelines Bats in the Hardcourt. That does it for our show today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Again, I am Joshua Thompson, Lakers fan aficionado, coming live from Santa Cruz. Got Fonz Yap. And Fonz, once again, tell the folks where we can find you at, if we can find you on Twitter, if we can find you on the Coast.
Just Sidelines and Slack, more or less. I have a Twitter, but I don't really post anything. It's more to follow all the news, the NBA news and all that stuff.
And Mr. Dunmore, where can we find you at?
Same like Fonz, Slack as well. I have a Twitter also, snap_shooters, but I mostly follow for the news and stuff. If I see something good, I may post on a page, but other than that, it's just to follow.
And you can find this episode on Sidelines' Facebook page. You can also find us on the website at sidelinesapp.com. Once again, I'm Joshua Thompson. Thanks for joining in for today's episode of Sidelines Pass Hitting the Hardcourt.